Two childhood friends reunite and become arms dealers and win a $300 million contract from the Pentagon to arm America's allies in Afghanistan. Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a comedy crime from 2016, titled War Dogs. David Pacuz sits in his beater of a car, smoking a joint, waiting until it's time to go into his client's house for their massage appointment. David is lost, bouncing from job to job, currently employed as a massage therapist and attempting and failing to make it as an entrepreneur selling bed sheets. While at a funeral he sees an old childhood friend, Ephraim DeVerely, dressed in a suit with his hair slicked back looking sharp. They reunite after the funeral and go to buy weed. As they drive, they reminisce about old times, and Ephraim explains that he is in the arms business collecting seized guns and reselling them through the internet. When some guys on the hood of a car in a parking lot offer to sell Ephraim weed, Ephraim asks how much it costs and hands over the cash. They continue talking like nothing happened, and when Ephraim asks where his weed is, they act as they've never seen him before and tell him to get lost while flashing a gun. He turns and walks to his car, and the thugs who just pulled a fast one on him think they've scared him away. Ephraim rummages around in the trunk of his car and returns with a semi-automatic in his hands and fires continuous rounds into the air. Ducking for safety behind cars, the thugs run as fast as they can and scatter in all directions. David is shocked. Ephraim chuckles as he walks back to the car, chucks his semi-automatic AR into the trunk and tells David not to worry, he has a Class 3 permit to carry. The next day David goes to meet Ephraim at his office. Ephraim is on the phone when he walks in. After he hangs up, David inquires about the call, and he explains that he was impersonating an army officer in order to learn what his competitor is bidding. When David asks who he's selling to, Ephraim confides, his only client is the US government. He elaborates by telling David that he's been doing it for the last 3 to 4 months, and in the past 8 weeks has made $200,000. Ephraim shows David the public government website, which lists every contract currently open for bidding, and explains that he can't compete with the big arms dealers, so he focuses on the small stuff. Says he's letting the rest fight over the pie while he's living off the crumbs, and there are millions of dollars worth of crumbs. Ephraim uses their childhood baseball team as a metaphor to explain how the government is awarding their arms contracts. With new legislation that was passed, the government makes sure everyone is getting a piece, just like their baseball team awards everyone, even though the strongest players are the ones who earned them the championship. David finds out his wife is pregnant and tells Ephraim while they sit in a diner together. David is concerned because he is unsure how he will provide for a baby, given his current financial situation. Ephraim offers David to work for him. He tells him how he needs help but doesn't trust anyone else. When David expresses hesitation, Ephraim convinces him, saying it's not about being for or against the war, it's being for money. David joins Ephraim and begins an intensive crash course in weaponry and procurement. They begin working day and night, consuming stimulants of all kinds, looking for and making bids. Meanwhile, David informs his girlfriend that he is working with Ephraim to sell bed sheets. Ephraim introduces David to Ralph Slutsky, his silent partner, who provided the seed money for AEY for a 25% return on AEY's earnings. Ephraim brings him large sums of money, which gives Ralph the impression that he is getting 25%. As David observes Ephraim and Ralph, he realizes that Ephraim has a talent for determining who people want him to be and then becoming that person. After a night of drinking and stirring up trouble, David gets a call from a Captain Santos of the US military, based in Baghdad, where it's currently 9 a.m. He lets David know they've just won the Beretta deal. It's 10 times bigger than anything they've closed so far, and they start shouting out of excitement. They're going to make $600,000 on this contract. While David's girlfriend is getting an ultrasound, David gets a phone call and sneaks out of the room to answer it. It's Captain Santos looking for an update. He expresses concern about the guns being transported directly from Italy, because legislation was just passed forbidding arms from being sent directly to Iraq. Ephraim suggests they ship the guns through Jordan and cross the border into Iraq. When David asks if it's legal, Ephraim explains that it's not illegal, it's called circumvention. They make the arrangements, and a few days later Ephraim shows up to David's house, and David steps outside to talk to him. There was an issue with the permit and Jordanian customs seized their shipment. While they are conversing, Captain Santos calls enraged, having learned of the seizure. He says he will cancel them for cause, and Ephraim tries to get Captain Santos to listen, but the line goes dead. If Captain Santos issues a cancel for cause, it will ruin them. David's girlfriend overhears them talking about guns and finds out that they aren't in the business of selling sheets. This leads to a fight in the bedroom, and we find out that she is now 5 months pregnant. She's upset that he lied to her. Ephraim storms in and asks if David has a passport, as they must now fly to Jordan. They don't get anywhere with the American embassy, so they take matters into their own hands, learning from locals that obtaining a new permit to fly the guns to Baghdad will take 6 weeks. They offer them $1,400 to go through their connections. After not hearing anything for 3 days, they become anxious. As they begin to think that they got ripped off, the phone rings in their hotel room and they run to answer it. The men are downstairs. They go down to find a truck filled with their Berettas. They couldn't get the permit but were able to get the guns back. The men tell them they don't need a permit to drive the guns to Iraq. With no other choice, they agree to drive their guns the 800 kilometers to Baghdad. Once on the road, they get stopped at a military checkpoint and are scared for their lives, but the soldiers let them through when the driver passes them 2 cartons of Marlboro cigarettes. Waking up at an abandoned gas station with the driver gone, David goes inside and discovers a dead body and runs out to tell Ephraim. Ephraim wakes up and tells David to chill out. They're in a war zone, there's dead bodies everywhere. He heads to the back to take a leak and sees the driver filling up the fuel containers. David's girlfriend Izzy calls and he tells her he is in his hotel room in Jordan, while 2 vehicles approach in the distance with men in the back with guns. He quickly hangs up, then honks the horn to alert Ephraim, who runs and jumps in the driver's seat and tries to start the truck. The truck starts and they speed away just as the driver comes running. He throws one of the gas containers into the back of the truck and jumps in as shots are fired at them. Ephraim and David notice a low-flying helicopter heading straight for them, followed by a group of Hummers that speed by and engage the terrorists chasing them. The US military has come to their rescue. They make their way to the Green Zone in Baghdad with the Berettas. Captain Santos thanks and congratulates them in disbelief that they just made it through the Triangle of Death. They sign for their money and get a military escort to the airport and take off from Iraq. Instead of calling it quits upon their return, they pursue more contracts. They buy cars and neighboring apartments, and their silent partner Ralph invests more, allowing them to expand further and hire employees. David discovers a huge contract for arms and ammunition, and the 2 of them head to Vegas for a trade show for arms manufacturers, quickly realizing a contract of this magnitude would be a logistical nightmare, requiring multiple vendors worldwide, dozens of outfits and hundreds of permits. That night, as David is playing blackjack, he meets Henry Gerard, an arms-dealing legend. Henry agrees to have a sit-down with them later. At the meeting, Henry tells David and Ephraim that he can fill the whole order exclusively. Albania, having prepared for a war that never came, is now disarming as a requirement for joining NATO, and they can buy everything they have. The offer is too good to turn down. Despite having reservations about Henry's ethics and reputation, they decide to work together and soon after travel to Albania to inspect the merchandise. The ammo passes their inspection, and they fly back, returning with just enough time to submit their bid for the contract. 5 months later they hear back. They've won the bid. Having never kept their books, they forge everything, going back 3 years to prepare for 3 separate audits, and 2 weeks later they arrive in Rock Island, Illinois for their big meeting with the procurement officers, who tell them they won the bid because they lowballed the offer. They were $53 million lower than the next lowest bid, which enrages Ephraim since they could have made a lot more money on this deal. When David returns to his apartment with news that he will be heading to Albania, his girlfriend tells him she found his secret money stash and found photos of him when he was in Iraq, even though he told her he never left Jordan. She tells him that she's going to stay with her mother. In Albania, David discovers that most of the crates are labeled with Chinese lettering, which means the bullets are Chinese, and the US has an embargo against China. But Ephraim has an idea. He wants to repack the bullets in new containers. They find a supplier to repackage the bullets into cardboard boxes for $100,000, which will save them $3 million in plane and fuel costs, increasing their profits. The first 50 million bullets are sent out without any problems, but when Ephraim finds out how much Henry is making per bullet, he calls David and tells him he wants to cut Henry out of the deal. David tells him to leave it alone and accuses Ephraim of screwing other people over. Ephraim doesn't handle the accusation well, and enters David's office while on the phone, looking for the partnership contract that David drew up prior to leaving for Albania, and destroys it. Men break into David's room and kidnap him in the middle of the night. They put him in the trunk and drive him to an industrial area where they beat him. Henry then appears with a gun pointed at David. He questions David on whether he truly believed he could cut him out of his own deal. They abandon him, bloodied and terrified for his life. Before returning to the US, he grabs his paperwork and computer and discovers that the cardboard supplier hasn't been paid anything at all. Before confronting Ephraim at the office, he visits his girlfriend, where he confesses everything, and she accepts him back. When David demands his cut, Ephraim refuses, and David threatens to go to his lawyer. He enters his office to look for the partnership agreement, only to discover that it is missing. He looks up to see Ephraim smirking at him. David throws a decorative grenade through Ephraim's window before exiting the building. After returning to life as a massage therapist, Ralph tracks David down and tells him that Ephraim wants to make peace and has asked him to act as mediator. During the meeting, Ephraim offers David $200,000, to which David replies that he will ruin Ephraim with all the evidence and documentation he collected. Ephraim tells him that he would be implicating himself as well because they did everything together and walks out, telling David that the $200,000 is no longer on the table. A reporter from the New York Times calls David a while later. The reporter wants to know if David has anything to say about the State Department's investigation into repackaging Chinese bullets. David becomes concerned, and as they leave, he runs into Ephraim. They have both received phone calls from the New York Times about their arms deal. David punches Ephraim for everything he put him through, and as the elevator doors open, the FBI is there to greet them. The guy that was not paid for repacking the bullets in Albania had contacted the Ministry of Defense, which prompted a full-scale investigation. The FBI arrested Ralph, who then wore a wire that eventually led to their arrest. Ephraim was sentenced to 4 years in prison and David got 7 months of house arrest in exchange for his testimony. Congress calls their arms deal a case study in all that was wrong with the government's arms procurement process, and in 2022 AEY will be eligible again to bid on federal contracts. Later, David arrives at a hotel room for a massage appointment. He's caught off guard when he sees Henry Gerard open the door. Henry tells him not to worry and invites him in. Henry apologizes for Albania. He tells David that he acted on bad information. He thanks David for leaving his name out of his testimony. David wants to ask a few questions, but Henry pulls a briefcase full of money and tells David that the money's for him and to stop asking questions. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos.